The kids can't read it who are in the archive.
We're going to get started. Can you hear me? Can you hear me pretty good? Okay, great. Well, my name is Donna Minkowitz, and this is the workshop on building literary community in repressive times. And if these aren't repressive times, I don't really know what are. But we have people representing a lot of great organizations on this panel today. And I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to talk about how literary community and literary community organizations help LGBTQ writers and LGBTQ people in general, and what we can do with them to address this shit show that we are all encountering right now. So I'm going to introduce everyone, reading their bios from my phone. Betsy Carswell in the middle leads the nonprofit Golden Crown Literary Society, supporting an international community devoted to increasing the diversity, accessibility, and visibility of Sapphic literature. She brings strategic insight and care-centered leadership to her work, grounded in the belief that literature is a powerful tool for connection and change. A retired senior manager in the U.S. intelligence community, Betsy spent 32 years as a cartographer and geospatial intelligence analyst. She holds a BA in geography and religion, an MS in pastoral counseling, and a certificate in conflict resolution and negotiation. Okay, and next up is Samuel Ernest. He is a theologian and writer in New Haven, Connecticut. He's the founding publisher and editor of Homodoxy, a new press for gay/queer theology and literature. His essays in erotic spiritual autobiography, I have to say I like that, erotic spiritual autobiography, have been featured in Cephalophore, Long Reads, and Roxane Gay's emerging writer series at the Audacity. He is graduating in May with a PhD in religious studies from Yale University, after which he will begin working on the press full-time. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
Katie Gilmartin believes that disconnection from the past is a kind of spiritual violence, and storytelling is one way to heal. Katie, they, runs the Queer Ancestors Project, devoted to forging sturdy relationships between young queer and trans people and their ancestors through free workshops in writing and printmaking. Her illustrated noir mystery, Blackmail My Love, won Lambda and IndieFab Gold Awards. Katie's second novel, Vice Academy, set in the shimmering suburban nightlife of 1950s San Francisco, illuminates the fierce, tender work of cultivating community. Katie Gilmartin, I think, yes. Next up is me. Hi, I'm Donna. I am a writer of memoir fantasy and journalism. My memoir, Growing Up Golem, which Lilith magazine called compulsively readable with emotional complexity and fierce imagination, is being republished right now in an all-new edition after 13 years. My novel, Donnaville, was praised by Chills at Will as a masterclass in world building. I'm the winner of a Lambda Literary Award, a GLAAD Media Award, an Exceptional Merit Media Award, and the National Gay and Lesbian Journalists Association Award for Outstanding Journalism. A former writer for the Village Voice. I live in the Hudson Valley of New York State. Next up is Michele Norris. She is the editor-in-chief of Electric Literature, winner of the 2022 Whiting Literary Magazine Prize. She's the first Black openly trans woman to helm a major literary publication, a 2021 Out 100 honoree. Her writing has been supported by MacDowell, Tin House, and the Cambilio Center for African American Fiction, and appears in McSweeney's American Short Fiction and Zora. She is co-host of the critically acclaimed podcast, Food for Thought, and her debut novel, When the Harvest Comes, was released by Random House in April 2025. And finally, we have Carol Rosenfeld. She is an editor and poet, Her debut novel, The One That Got Away, was published by Bywater Books in June 2015, and her short stories have appeared in several anthologies. She's currently working on a second novel, as well as a memoir and a collection of her poems. Carol has been the chair of the Publishing Triangle for many years, and in 2023, she was recognized with the Gay City News Impact Award for her service. She is also a proud member of the SAS Hall of Fame. So great. Welcome, all of you. Almost everyone on the panel, except for Betsy, is both a literary writer themselves and someone involved in creating literary community and being part of a literary community organization. Betsy has informed me she is not a writer, but as the head of the Golden Crown.
I do write email.
Yes. But anyway, so I like the fact that most of us are also writers, and I don't do anything as significant as what these people do in terms of literary community, but for the past 5 years, I have run a very popular, very open mic for writers in Beacon, New York, which is the town I live in, called Lit Lit. Okay. So I suggested this panel because I've been aware for many years that LGBTQ literary organizations have provided crucial support personally to me in my writing career, to me as an individual and as a writer. And I wanted to get some opportunity to think about these organizations with other people. And not everyone represents a specifically LGBTQ literary organizations, but all kinds of ways of creating literary community, I think are really crucial. So I would like to start by going down the line and asking everyone, how are you personally choosing to work for literary community in the current moment, given the particular horrible things going on in our country? And then, Michele, can I start with you and go down the line?
Sure. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. It doesn't sound to me like it's on, but it is on. So I'm one of the people that Donna mentioned who does not work for an explicitly LGBT organization, but we have, I'm the editor-in-chief. In June, I'll become the executive director. I am queer. We have a lot of queer people on our staff, on our board as well. And I would just say, for us, first and foremost, we are a publication. Electric Literature, for anyone who's not aware, Electric Literature is an online literary journal, and our mission is to make literature more exciting, relevant, and inclusive. We have 3 online verticals that fall under the umbrella of Electric Literature: Recommended Reading, where we publish longer form short fiction; The Commuter, where we publish poetry, graphic narrative, and flash prose in both fiction and nonfiction. And we have one called Personal Narrative that we launched a few years ago, where we publish narrative, memoir, and essay. Okay. Is that better? Okay. Oh, that's way better. Okay, thank you. And then outside of that, we publish also we publish cultural criticism essays, we publish author interviews, book lists, things like that. So we're busy. We're publishing a lot of work. And we have over 3 million readers globally. We've been around since 2009, just giving you the basic information. Everything that we publish is free to read, and we don't charge for submissions, and we pay our writers. So all of the... Thank you. We are currently running a fundraiser because you never want those things to change. Please consider promoting. There's a couple of specific things I can talk about. I mentioned this story on the previous panel that I was just on, but when I got the job as editor-in-chief in 2021, there was a lot of sort of excitement and press around it and a lot of attention. And I sort of thought that, I remember my therapist at that time, who was a Black trans woman, was like, she was like, my group chat, like they didn't know that you're my client, and they were all talking about it, and I was like, they were talking about someone who got a job at a literary journal. But it was like, it was a newsworthy thing, and so I kind of thought that I would see a lot of submissions from trans and gender nonconforming writers of color, and within a few months I realized that was not just going to be the case just because I was there. And so I was like, well, how can I address this? Because at the time, this is 2021, so Dave Chappelle had released a comedy special in which he attacked trans people, which is his shtick. And also that was the year that the author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie got embroiled in some scandal because she said some not great things about trans women. And that kind of had blown up that summer. And so for me, I was like, I'm getting all this praise from this corner of this industry, but there's all these other things happening. And the Dave Chappelle thing in particular dominated the news cycle for like a month, which in 2021 is like unheard of. But it did. And I remember that for all the conversations that I was seeing everywhere, both in terms of sort of legacy journalistic institutions, places like MSNBC and CNN, and also just people who have large platforms on podcasts on YouTube, they were talking about trans people, but they were never including trans people in the conversation, and they were sort of ignoring the existence of people who live at the intersection of being trans and being a person of color. And so I was like, okay, well, what can I do? I can't get anyone booked on CNN. Like, I don't have that much power. At least not yet. But I run a really prominent literary journal. There are books that exist in the world because an author published a short work on electric literature. Agents and editors read electric literature, and I get emails from them all the time about pieces and wanting to be connected to people that we've published. So I was like, what I can do is try and make sure that those of us who have these stories to tell are getting published, our work is getting in front of some of the decision makers in this industry, and that there are more people who look like me and identify like me, and whose stories are being told and elevated. And so I created an online essay series that we fundraised for because we wanted to pay these writers more than we typically pay. And we made our goal, exceeded our goal in a week, which was amazing. And we were able to actually publish even more writers than we initially intended. And we did, and like one of the essays was recognized by Best American Essays even. And then I decided that this should be a book, and I wrote a book proposal, and we sold the book to Harper One. It came out last year. It's called Both And, Essays by Trans and Gender Nonconforming Writers of Color. It's a really phenomenal anthology, and it is a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award. And I realize this is a long story, and I apologize.
Take your time.
But the point that I want to make is that at Electric Literature, like I have a unique opportunity to meaningfully elevate the voices of the communities that I'm a part of, and the communities, and even beyond the communities that I'm a part of, communities of people where their stories need to be told. In this time, I think there's nothing more important than a multitude of voices that should be at the center of conversations about them, and so rarely are. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Electric Literature, is to make sure that the people who are constantly being talked about and debated about as though their lives are issues and not like lives have a space, and that their words can get in front of people who can continue to elevate them even more.
Great, thank you. And we go down the line. Carol?
So the Publishing Triangle, and I'm the chair of the Publishing Triangle, we're pretty much doing what we've been doing for a long time, but with a renewed sense of awareness, maybe, and importance. We have a couple new awards. Actually, I'm just going to, on the back of your program, you'll see all of our awards, and it'll give information about our ceremony, award ceremony on April 16th, and it will be, it's on the internet or whatever. You'll be able to see it without actually being there. I'm not technical. And also, I always want to say this about our award ceremony. It's free. And the reception afterwards is free. You know, nobody has to pay. I'm not going to name the amount of money that sometimes people have to pay to get in to see certain award ceremonies. I wouldn't do that. But, you know, anybody can come, and we're very proud of that. So recently we did, in the last couple of years, we put in something, it's funded by Rob Burns. By the way, all of our awards get money. Everybody gets money. It runs from about $500 for the leadership, Michele Carlsberg Leadership Award, up to $3,000 for the Whitehead Award, which is our Lifetime Achievement Award. And most of the prizes are $1,000. So the Publishing Triangle, we recently established a Torchbearer Award. It's funded personally by our treasurer, Rob Burns, who is well-known at Saints and Sinners. And it honors a non-publishing entity that makes a significant contribution to the literary world. So our first winner was Drag Story Hour, New York City. Our second was Emily Dobrinsky, who was the first out lesbian president of the American Library Association. Then we gave it to Transformative Schools, which is a free after-school program for trans, queer, non-binary, and gender-expansive students aged 9 to 15. And they are actually in the process of trying to become an accredited school that the students could actually go to. And this year, we're giving it to The Other Side of Silence, which is New York City's longest producing LGBTQIA plus theater company. And I just, I want to say this because I made a note. I was just in the previous reading, and Martin Sherman, who is a playwright, for his reading, although he's just written a memoir, he read something from one of his plays called Gently Down the Stream, and it's a speech that the best man gives at a wedding. But anyway, it makes a lot of reference. He talks about the upstairs lounge fire here in New Orleans, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons that he was moved to read it. But it reminded me of how important theater can be in, allowing us to see people's lives and perhaps create a sense of understanding, of empathy. So, I think that I'm glad we're giving it to TOSOS because it's a really good organization. And the other one is last year, with funding from Jennifer Levin, we established the Amber Hollabaugh Award for LGBTQ social justice writing. And we're excited about that award too. It's, in its early years, but we're excited about it.
Thank you, Carol. And I, if you will permit me, I will just add, as a fan of the Publishing Triangle, who lives in the New York area where it's based, the Publishing Triangle also provides a great reading series where LGBTQ writers can read their work and get listeners, and also a lot of social events, and where you can meet writers, editors, people in publishing, and other literary folks who are queer and trans. So thanks. And next we'll go on to Betsy Carswell.
Hello. As an introvert, I have a tendency to overthink a question before I start to answer it. And so the question was phrased as, how are you personally choosing to work for the LGBTQIA literary community? And I mean, it's a tale as old as time. A 32-year career intelligence officer running a literary organization for Sapphic literature. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me, and then I will talk about JCLS. But I retired from the intelligence community with a specialization in geospatial intelligence, that's satellite imagery and mapping and that kind of thing. And when I retired, I decided that I still care about national security. I still care about the safety of this country. And what I saw was a country that was being ripped apart by the polarization going on, and I thought, well, what can I do? And so I went back to graduate school and got a certificate in conflict resolution and negotiation, which I thought would be helpful. And then I came to realize that that really is not helpful in this moment. What I needed to understand, and I'm not being flippant at all, is cults and cult thinking. So I've done a lot of reading and that kind of thing on that. But anyway, COVID hit, and we were all trying to find something to do. And so I started reading more, and I was looking for quality stories that spoke to me. And a former colleague introduced me to GCLS, and so I joined during COVID. And yada, 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 I'm the board president. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but it did. And so the question of how am I choosing to do this in this particular time is that we all have to do something. And I am in no way a literary expert. As I said, I write email. I can read, I do read, not as much as I would like. But I have certain skills in the organizational space that I think can be helpful for an organization like GCLS. And sometimes, if you're familiar with the concept of content and process, I got the process stuff down. I'm learning the content. And I've had a few years to do that. So my process in leading GCLS is supporting democracy and anti-authoritarianism through the content of Sapphic literature and community building. So that's that piece of it. GCLS is a 22-year-old organization founded by women who felt that their work wasn't being recognized at the same level as other work in the queer space. And so they did what lesbians do, and they started their own thing. And so that's the Golden Crown Literary Society. We have, as was our start, a full suite of awards. We give awards out every year, and I think we're up to 19 categories. And the top winner in each category wins $1,000. And then we have a Popular Choice Award, the Ann Bannon Popular Choice Award, which has 3 tiers. Bronze is $5,000, silver is $10,000, and gold is $15,000. This is due to a very generous grant by someone who lives in New Orleans, as a matter of fact. In addition to that, we have a writing academy with 4 tracks, sort of a basics and then more advanced work, and then the business of writing, and then we've just started an asynchronous track, and we're looking at more online options there. And we also have an in-person conference that we do every year, the GCLS Con, we call it. And it is where we bring together, the organization, by the way, is not just for authors, it's for writers, it's for readers, it's for editors, publishers, audiobook narrators, anyone in the literary space, and fully inclusive of anyone who has an appreciation for Sapphic Lit. And the in-person con is where we give out the awards, but we also have lots of panels like this one, and there's karaoke, and an opportunity to gather together in a space. And that is an important, community building is essential in the building of democracy and fighting against authoritarianism. We need these connections with one another. And so we need to do everything that we can to bring people together intersectionally, different organizations, and that's what the con is to me. This year, it's in Orlando, Florida. There's a long story as to why we're going to Orlando. I think it's important for us to be in challenging spaces. for us to be in a place like Orlando, in Florida, where our books and our identities are under threat. And there was a lot of pressure to not go. And I felt very strongly that we needed to, in addition to the contract issues. If we are a mission-focused organization, which we are, how are you supporting your mission if you're afraid to go to the place where the thing that you stand for is under threat? We have to be there. And I am under no illusion that GCLS will be able to make significant change in Florida in the 5 days that we're there in August. However, what we are doing is we're building connections with people in Florida, and that's why I'm here, is to come to the South and get connected. And we're using the tools that we have to elevate the work that the people in Florida are doing. They want us there, and they need us to come. And if nothing else, they need karaoke. They need that queer joy. They need that opportunity to just be in a space with people who care about them. And so that's GCLS in a bigger than a nutshell, but yeah, so that's GCLS.
Thank you. And Sam.
Betsy, for someone who's not a writer, that was very well organized and shaped. I liked the way that you returned to the karaoke. It was very effective.
My wife makes me go to Toastmasters.
And it'll be a good transition, too, because I'm starting a cult. That's what I'm doing. I'm starting a small press called Homodoxy for Gay and Queer Theology and Literature. And I have a lot more hopes than I have experiences at this point. The press comes from the doctoral studies that I've been doing, which stem from my own coming out story of, as I'm sure is common to many of us in the room, thinking it's possible to find every book on the shelf that speaks to our experience and read it, because how many queer stories can there truly be? So you build your own collection, and then eventually it becomes inadequate. You think, okay, this isn't quite me. Where am I? My mother is a pastor. My dad did his PhD in theology and then went into publishing. Which is exactly what I'm doing. I didn't think I would follow in his footsteps that way, but also very nervous. It's my first time talking about this press in public.
You're doing
Thank you. Sorry.
You're doing fabulously, and look at all these people. So excited to hear from you.
Yeah. So it became clear to me that the writing that's available to queer Christians is so limited to a couple of things. It's limited to what does the Bible say about X, Y, and Z? Is it okay to be trans? Here's my story. Here's how I convinced my dad with my story. And here's how you can either be celibate or married. And even when I was in the closet, I knew celibacy wasn't for me. My spirituality and my eroticism are overflowing. That's what I tried to capture in my writing. It's this spilling out. And so I'm interested in writing that is more adept at capturing what queer spirituality actually does, which is overflow. The categories that we have for it, including the category of queer, all categories. So in order to do that, I'm starting a press. I'm going to be publishing 2 books a year starting in 2027. I'm fundraising. I've learned a lot, or trying to learn a lot from the history of gay and queer publishing. It's always been in repressive times in one way or another. That's our history, that's our legacy. It's a proud one and it's a very strong one, and it's a history of the integrity of small things. And also small things are expensive too, which is why I'm also trying to find my donors and applying for grants. So that's one big part of my present right now. Having turned in my dissertation, I'm doing a lot of email writing and also getting my contracts nailed down to try to be fair to my writers. I'm basing my contract on the Authors Guild's recommended contract. Homodoxy will publish a series called Books Reprinted in Contemporary Context, BRIC, because BRIC is what? Foundational and projectile, you can throw it. A little tongue-in-cheek there. I'm doing a series called Unitudes, which will be Homodoxy's version of small book with big ideas. So who is the writer who has been thinking about this topic for their whole life? How is keeping it in their stomach shaped it? How can they put that on the page, and what can I as an editor do to help them kind of make it legible to others? I want it to be weird. I want it to be things that writers wouldn't write for any other press besides homodoxy. And then there's an open call for gay, queer, trans writing of all genres, which will also, I'm hopefully be breadthy and editing intensive too. I worked for 2 years at the Yale Review as an assistant editor there instead of teaching. Yeah, I can't announce the books because it's in this awkward place of I'm working on the contract, so they aren't published yet. There are books coming in the pipeline, and they'll be good. I can say that the wonderful historian and queer religious studies scholar Mark D. Jordan, who has been really foundational in my work, is writing a book for my press, which is
Wow.
a huge honor.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well done.
And so that's, thank you. I will leave it there and listen to Katie now. Yeah, thank you all for having me.
Thank you all for coming today. Thank you, Donna, for putting together this very important panel. So when I was in my 20s, I interviewed 40 plus queer and trans people, although I didn't have access to the word trans at that time, but queer and trans people about their lives in the 1950s. And those stories just lodged in my heart and never left. And queer and trans history really saved my life. So I was an academic, a very unhappy academic for a decade, and then I transitioned into being a community-based printmaker and writer. And I really wanted to share queer and trans history with young people. That was super important to me. So in 2010, I began a program called the Queer Ancestors Project, which offers free workshops to queer and trans people age 18 to 25, free, all supplies included. The programs include the printmaking program, which also integrates writing, a creative writing program, which is taught in conjunction with a QT BIPOC organization called Still Here SF. We're based in the Bay Area, and also a free comics program. Our participants are 80% BIPOC, and the majority are trans and non-binary. And we build community through the arts using history as a linchpin. And when I began the program, I really thought I was going to use like free arts program, free writing classes as a way to lure in young people and then sort of slip in the history. And I found I was really wrong on that. Young people are showing up for the history. They are showing up for the connection to ancestors. It is really important and compelling to them. It is a way of building community across time and space. It's a way of rooting themselves deeply in the world. So in everything that we do in the program, we really try and put together 3 things: supporting creativity, building connection with ancestors, and rooting folks deeply in community. So I just want to share 2 exercises that I do in my workshops, and I feel a little bit like an imposter because my workshops are really primarily printmaking workshops, although we also do writing, but I feel like everything I do could also be in a writing workshop. So each of the participants choose what ancestors they want to create about. And one thing that's really great is when I began the program, I kind of had to be more of a teacher because there wasn't that much information available out there, and now there is. So they can go out and research whatever they want to research with support from me or with support from people I know if they're trying to find information they can't find. But they decide who their ancestors are. They decide who they want to connect with. And then in the workshop, each of us teaches what we've learned about our ancestors, whatever ancestors we've studied, whatever events we've studied, so that I am not in my academic career, I was the repository of knowledge to which I, gave everyone else. So in the workshop, everyone is teaching everyone else. And I'm learning far more than I could ever have offered. And then what we do is each participant can ask the group to collectively brainstorm what image, what piece of writing, what creative project could come out of that research that they've shared with us. And we have a conversation about the fact that even if 3 of us decided to write the exact same poem about the exact same subject, they would be 3 profoundly different poems. So we agree that all the ideas that come up will be shared by all of us. And it establishes from the start a really collaborative sense of creation and a sense of mutuality rather than competition in whatever it is that we create. And then another essential exercise that I started during COVID and carried it forward because it's worked out so very well is art dates, writing dates. So every week in the workshop, each participant is paired with another participant in the workshop, and they're invited to meet for an hour or so. And they can do anything they want with that hour. One possible suggestion is they spend 10 minutes talking about what they're going to work on. They spend 40 minutes working on it, and then they spend 10 minutes talking about what they worked on. And I actually now start the art dates before the workshop, so when folks walk in, they're not walking into a room full of strangers. They're walking into at least knowing a couple of people in the workshop. But through this exercise, through the weekly art dates, they get to experience creation as an act that can be embedded in community, start to finish. So really trying to dispel that idea that creation is always this very isolated and lonely experience. And every workshop also leads to a culminating event. We have very intergenerational audiences that receive and welcome their creative work. And at our events, we connect and celebrate the artists, but we also connect with ancestors. And one of the events that we started a few years back is all the artists have made prints in this program about both about ancestors and also about resistance. And for the culminating event, we move our whole print studio outside and invite folks to bring T-shirts, and the artists print on the T-shirts for free. So folks literally leave wearing their ancestors on their sleeves. So I feel like resourcing youth, resourcing young people. I mean, age 18 to 26, you're an adult, and yet often really, really, really profoundly still finding your way in the world. And in the Bay Area, that is especially difficult. It's such an expensive place to live, and there's so much exclusivity. There's so much ways in which young people, particularly the young people we work with, are not welcomed. So I feel like that is such an important thing that we can do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So panel, what would you all think about for the next bunch of questions? You don't have to go in order. Folks can just jump in as you like. All right, and I'm also going to switch around the order of questions just to confuse you.
Okay.
All right. So the corporatization of publishing is at the highest level I have ever seen it in 4 decades in the writing world. All writers are affected by the pressure to corporatize and to put out work that some corporation believes will make a substantial profit, not just a wee modest little profit, but a lot of profit, because they really want a lot of profit out of our work. How do you address this unpleasant fact in the work you do? And if anyone wants to jump in.
Well, I will.
Great.
I'll be interested to see how this plays out, because I feel like for the big publishing houses, LGBTQ people were kind of the flavor of the year or whatever. And now that all this repression is coming in, I'm guessing that the big publishing houses are going to back off. And it'll be the small presses who have been doing the heavy lifting all along who are going to, continue to do that. So that's, we'll see how that plays out. But, and I never would expect to be published by a big publisher anyway. So, for me, it's no different. It doesn't affect how I do my work.
Anybody else? This is one of the bigger questions. What do you do about corporatization?
I don't know. in a big way. But I mean, I'm coming from an interesting standpoint in this. Electric literature isn't, first, we publish short work, so we don't publish books. We are a completely independent digital publisher, and we work with, in terms of promoting books, because we do a decent amount of books coverage. Like, yes, we publish the creative work, and that's sort of where our sense of prestige and where a lot of the attention comes from. But on any given week, like 80% of the content on our website is work that's actually covering other books that are being published, and the author interviews, the book lists, all of that work. And we publish excerpts in those things. And we work with writers who are being published by all kinds of presses, from really tiny, tiny little one-man shop, two-man shop presses to the Random Houses, the Harper Ones. But we do, sort of in terms of our books coverage work, we do pay special attention to independent presses because they're doing so much of that work. And literary journals traditionally have also done a lot of that work. That's where a lot of these writers have sort of cut their teeth and had their first sort of opportunities to be published. And so we publish a lot of content that focuses on small press books, small presses themselves. We do a number of most anticipated lists every year, and that's one of the lists that we do that actually gets a lot of traffic on our site and does really well. So one thing that we know is that that audience is there and the readers are still there. That has not changed. In fact, according to us, it seems like it's increasing. I'm also a traditionally published author. My novel came out from Random House. The Both-Hand Anthology was published by Harper One. I have only been published by major corporate presses. And that appealed to me because I wanted to have a little money in my life. And it's interesting. My sense has been very similar to Carol, to what you have said, that there are a number of us who got book deals in the couple of years sort of post 2020, and this applies to queer people of color all around, marginalized voices. There were also a lot of changes that happened within the corporate publishing industry, and you saw a big influx of diverse hires in high leadership positions at publishing houses. Most of those diverse hires have not lasted, and that has been interesting. There's been a New York Times article actually about it. And in terms of the books, it's less clear what's happening. There are still queer people who are getting these book deals, and sometimes those advance numbers have not gone down. For some people, they've gone up, in fact. And it's complicated because what's happening to those books, the kind of coverage they're getting, the kind of positioning they're getting in the industry, that is shifting. But it's also shifting for all books, especially literary books. The book's coverage has decreased tenfold everywhere. The life of a literary debut novel that came out in 2025 is, largely speaking, going to be very different than the life of a literary debut novel that came out in 2019. It's a different landscape for everyone, so it's really hard to know exactly what's happening. But given the way that the publishing industry works, my guess is also that it's going to be a quiet backing down of things. And it's interesting, in conversations that I've had with my agent. My agent is a gay man. He represents a lot of queer authors. He's a vice president at an iconic agency. He's been in the business for a long time. And we had a conversation, and he was like, all I'm hearing is that they're doubling down on their support for these authors and their desire to acquire the works of these of queer authors. That's all I'm hearing. But when you talk about corporate publishing, even the highest echelon people who are at the editorial level, they have some decision-making power, but they don't have the real decision-making power, right? It's much higher up, right? If you think about Lisa Lucas, who was the first Black woman to be the executive director of the National Book Foundation, and in 2021 became the publisher and vice president of Pantheon at Penguin Random House, and another, I forget the name of the other imprint. and she was fired sort of unceremoniously a couple of years later. She was part of that thing that I was talking about. Like, she was the publisher of a major imprint, but she had to answer to a board of straight white men. They are the real decision makers, right? There's always that circle up there. So what I'm trying to say is that there are conversations that are happening that even the people who are most close to the writers and the books are not a part of and are not happening. And so at this, I am trying to get as much information as I can. But I don't know yet officially. And there's a lot of things that will never be said and would never be said. This is a business that operates in a lot of secrecy. I will never know what the marketing budget was for my novel. I know how much they paid for my novel. I know what happened with the marketing. I do not know how much money was allocated to that. And I could ask them 1,000 times. I will never get an answer, right? That is how this business works. And that's me asking about my work and the resources that were put into my work. I will never be told that. My agent will never be told that directly. That's just not how it happens. So if you can imagine that that's what happens on our level, then you have to think about the fact that there are many conversations that will not trickle down to us. And so we may never really know, but we have eyes and we have ears. So I don't know how helpful that is, but.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. Levels of the decision makers way above the senior editor level. Yes, really important. And Betsy?
I told Donna I wasn't going to answer this question because I have no expertise in the area, but as we know, you can run a cabinet department without any expertise in your area. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. It occurs to me what I'm seeing, and again, I'm just sort of watching what's going on and talking to knowledgeable people. As corporate groups were leaning into LGBTQ literature, our authors get excited and they start to want to go to the corporate publishers. But now that that's drawing down, this is when the authors are ramping up toward it. So I think that's going to, there's sort of two graphs that are shifted from one another. But there's certainly a move for a lot of people to publish independently. But then there are also long-term, I'll talk about Sapphic because that's my area, but Sapphic publishers that have been around for a long time that have taken care of their authors and have built the Sapphic literature space that we're in now. And so it would be great, on paper, if this is a huge opportunity for these publishers to swoop in and take what corporate is drawing away from, but the business model seems really harsh right now for that to actually happen. So I do have concerns about what that retrenchment will give, and whether or not the legacy publishers are going to be able to swoop in. And folks like Bywater can give you more information on that. But yeah, it's a concern. I don't know that. I mean, it could be that the smaller publishers are going to have some opportunity there. I'm hopeful.
So if I can just ask Betsy, it sounds like you're saying the business model for small presses is a really hard one right now. It's just making the ends meet in terms of paying for the publication of a book is particularly hard right now. Can you say why?
I'll try. I've gotten quite an education over the last couple of years. Well, the costs have gone up. And paper and everything else, and we didn't talk about this morning, but I don't know what shape the supply chain is in post-COVID. That was a mess afterwards, after COVID and for some time. But there are things I think that authors expect from a publisher in terms of services and that kind of thing, and none of those things come cheap. Everybody, I mean, particularly, I think this is true in the queer literary space. You mentioned the commitment to paying your authors, paying people who write. There is a desire to treat people, pay them for their work, and all of that eats into the profits and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, the business model and the values to take care of people can be in tension. Would you agree with that? And so I think that part of what GCLS is trying to do is help train authors in the skills that they need to represent themselves in the space, and to take some of that pressure off of the publishers to create all of that. They don't have marketing teams to handle all of that, but people can control their own social media presence. A lot of folks don't want to do that. They want to write their books and not get engaged in social media and all that kind of space. They just want folks to buy them. So I don't know, that was a bit of rambling, but that's where my head is these days.
Thank you, and I see Katie.
Yeah, I didn't think I had an answer to this question, but when I reflected on it a while, I did. I mean, on a very, very, very much microscopic level, every cohort that I work with, we have a conversation, I have a conversation with them about how if we value our work according to what sells, we are allowing capitalism to define our value. And all of the young people, when they hear this, I see them gasp, and yet it is something that they knew. But they needed to have it articulated for them. And it's really helpful to have a conversation about that. We also provide stipends to our participants. We provide them with a lot of free materials. We provide them with good quality videos of their performances. Good quality scans of their work so that they can go on and take it out into the world more easily. Our young writers also get published with Foglifter, an alternative press which shares our values: free and accessible release parties, welcoming young creatives, cultivating diversity and accessibility. And we also create opportunities and a context in which they understand that they can share their work directly with audiences. And I think the comics community is a really, really good model for this. Comics people have conventions, and everyone just brings their work that they've photocopied and stapled together, and they sell them to each other. And they do this on very local scales, and they do this on massive scales. And it is a really direct way that young people can participate in getting their work out in the world.
Great, and Sam.
Yeah. I see homodoxy as building a home between three different kinds of presses: the religious presses, academic presses, and queer presses, which I think are our closest kin. I say our, it's for sure me at this point, but also you as homodoxy readers. And the academic presses have become increasingly corporatized, with journals, including queer and feminist journals, being owned by larger university presses, and those university presses take your copyright when you publish with them, which is just standard, because the expectation is that you're in a tenured job that is paying you for your work already, and so you don't get paid for the work, and your copyright goes to the journal, and you can publish it later, but I just refuse to publish with a journal because I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not getting my copyright away. As someone who's trying to navigate reprints, this is a very important queer issue to me. Copyright law does not account for the way that queers form relationships across generations. There was a Argentinian feminist queer liberation theologian named Marcela Althaus Reed, and she's huge in the field. She was drawing on the writers of New Narrative, Kathy Acker, Robert Glick, Bruce Boone, and she was trying to bring their narrative techniques to theology, and she wrote some very difficult to read theology in the tradition of liberationist Latino and Latina theology. She had a critique of that field, because as soon as liberation theology started happening in Central America, and in particularly Brazil as well, you had European theologians who would take trips to the favelas, to the slums, spend a week or two there, write their liberation theology book, and go and sell it. And so it's a commodification of queer experience as theology that feeds this market that is completely detached from the lives of the people who it's actually supposed to be representative of. And so she did theology where you could smell the odor of the women selling lemons on Buenos Aires. That was important to her, the scent of theology, the scent of the poor and indecent women who were actually doing the theological work that mattered to her. And her books are sold by Routledge for $50. And her copyright is owned by a partner who won't let up the copyright. I've tried. So it's a big problem that I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. Is how to reclaim texts that have become corporatized in this way, because the people who really will understand them and need them won't always have access to the money there's a fabulous handbook that was just published by Palgrave for Introduction to Queer and Trans Studies. Best scholars in the field, wonderful assortment of new scholars and senior scholars. The book is hardcover is $200. So if you're part of a university, if you have the library access, you can download it for free, all of it. So corporatization. I envision my work as like trying to see an outside to something. This is how I've been thinking about AI. I'm kind of done with social media. It might be a problem for my press going forward, but I want to be able to build things in new ways, learning from the history of queer publishing, which is very network and organic based. And so seeing the outside of something and then building a home in it. And that building is going to be very labor intensive, hence a lot of fundraising, but I also think it matters. It will be smaller. For it to work, you have to work with writers who have a vision that aligns with you. So writers who publish with Homodoxy aren't going to be, they will get, I'm trying to pay $2,000 for a book, for an advance. They will get money up front, and then, I know, it's wild. And then they will get royalties. But I think I'll be able to support that, hopefully, and this might be idealistic, but finding the donors and grants that work while slowly building up my own stockpile. So of money.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great answers, everybody. A friend of mine named Margaret Coble, who lives in New Orleans and is a queer activist, she makes a T-shirt that says, "Community is everything," which I think is really particularly important for this time. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask folks, what role spirituality is playing at present, if any, in your conception of literary community and how you do your work? Another hard one.
Go ahead.
Just as my professional journey has had kind of a weird path, so has my spiritual one. I'm very specifically have a significant history as a mainline liberal Episcopalian, and you know, hence my effusive nature. You know, when Episcopalians really feel the music, it's like this. It's very moving. Anyway, at this point in my life, my spirituality, I would say, is more of a paradigm that frames me and my values. It's not something that I project or share with anyone, but it informs the way I move in the world. There's a theorist, James Fowler, who has these stages of religious development, and I can't claim that I have reached level 6. That's Martin Luther King. I'm not quite there. But the non-specificity of that, the sort of movement through specificity to universality, is sort of where I am with it. I respect the the belief system or non-belief system of anyone. It just is what informs me. And my wife teases me that I did have a very significant Episcopal background. I went through the discernment process for priesthood, terribly unsuccessful. But my wife says that GCLS is my flock, that is my ministry. And that's one way to look at it. I look at it as mission. It could be seen as ministry in a in a non-specific way. It's how I move through the world and what informs my values.
Anybody else? Yes,
Yes.
Katie.
Did anybody else want to speak? Were you? Nope. Well, it's interesting because when I started studying queer and trans history, it was from an academic perspective, and my experience of academia is I was only allowed to engage from the neck up, which was very, very difficult for me. And then it became very, very difficult for me to figure out how to engage in a deeper way and support young people in engaging in a deeper way with ancestors. But one of the things that we talk about is that when we reach for ancestors, it is also possible that they are reaching for us. And I think that one thing that does is it brings a sense of responsibility and generosity to our reaching, not just please come help us, but I am also here connecting with you and listening to what it is that you might need from me and how my body is living out your dreams, for example, or my body is living out ancestors are moving through me. Another very important aspect of our workshop that I believe is deeply spiritual is a dedication to joy and support around creativity. We have a ritual in every workshop and every time we meet that we celebrate each other's work. We listen, we admire, we embrace, we applaud, we welcome new work into the world. Everything that arrives into our program as, that's been ripped from the universe, because that's what we do when we create, is welcomed. And I think that this practice of attentiveness and support is really deeply connective and also deeply spiritual. And what I also see working with young people is as they study ancestors, as they recognize that their identities, the terms they use, the style they have, that all of this came from a generation or two or three before them, they suddenly at some point realize that they are the ancestors of the future. And that brings with them a sense of responsibility, an awareness that what they are doing has impact in the future. And I really see in that moment, they step into history. They recognize that in various ways and with varying degrees of privilege and power, we are all co-creating the future. And so that's a really beautiful thing that I see happening. Yeah.
Thank you. Sam?
Spirituality is so unwieldy. When you want something of it, it withholds. When you don't want something of it, it might smack you in the face. So thinking with this kind of question is really fun. I'll begin with my own experience of ancestors, because when you said that they're reaching back as well, I mean, I'm very boring theologically in some ways as a Christian. I believe in the resurrection of the dead, and I believe that the men that I have been writing about who have died of HIV/AIDS are alive, and I have felt them with me at times. I have felt very small affirmations of their presence. So I don't know how to share that. That's the thing about the academic world, is that it can be so isolating. So there's a translation question that comes from how does my own practice as a writer and a scholar translate to other people who I would like to introduce these people to. But on a larger scale, I think that what spirituality does is it can help cultivate desires for other kinds of lives and other kinds of, the academic word right now is other worlds, otherwise worlds, and there's something true to that. There's a deep dissatisfaction that that can be spiritually productive when we look around and we feel that things aren't right, we know that they aren't right, and then we learn from that feeling that they could be better. And the communal aspect of that is you can't really do much with that alone. You have to bring those feelings and bring those desires into community and build communal practices, which is something that I'm hoping, I'm realizing I haven't really talked much about the communal aspect of homodoxy because I'm reaching towards it, but I would like to have, events around launches, of course, and I would eventually like to have a small space where I can have classes and as cheap as possible to give classes in issues of queer spirituality and theology of various traditions, because it's part of our history. In gay and lesbian queer publishing, if you look at the early liberationist magazines, you'll have an ad for a bathhouse right next to an ad, or a piece by a rabbi and a pastor discussing what Leviticus says about homosexuality. It's remarkable. It was all on the same page sometimes. So, yeah.
Cool, thank you. Anybody else?
I'll just say, it's, I have, well, specifically right now, I've been thinking a lot about this Jewish kind of, I guess you'd call it, concept of tikkun olam, which means repairing the world. So, it's working for social justice. And I thought that was really appropriate right now. But for me, spirituality is kind of very, I've had a lot of what I think of as, I was like very moved by the monks who were doing the Walk for Peace, and that was on Facebook. I was really just amazed by it, and it also appeared to me because I was following it and how many people were following it and how many people were engaged with it. But on the other hand, I don't know that I could be a Buddhist. I admire people that can do that, but I don't think that I could. But I also feel like spirituality is something, for me, in a lot of ways, it's connected to music. And many years ago, I was in Dublin, in Ireland. I was doing a trip, and they had a church there where they still sang the Mass in Latin. And I went to hear it, and it was just one of the most overwhelming things I'd ever experienced in my life. I wept. And yet, I don't really know the context of the Mass either. I'm just saying that as a piece of music, it really affected me. But when the priest started speaking in English, I kind of was like, oh, all right, I'm gone. And I hope I didn't, I'm not trying to insult anybody. But, so, I feel like, I don't know. I don't even know what point I'm trying to make. But I think that maybe I'm trying to speak to how the arts can create some sort of commonality with people, and that's why they're very important.
Yeah, I think my thoughts on this question come more from my angle as being a writer and an author rather than a publisher. But I think that the spiritual life, the spiritual side of us, and the subconscious, I think those are at work a great deal in the creative process. I think there's something very spiritual about it, at least for me. I'm not a terribly woo spirituality kind of oriented person, although I grew up in church, and that might be that's part of why, probably. But I do feel that there's really something intangible about the work or doing creative work, the practice of doing creative work. I can sort of feel it in myself, in my mind, in my body, when I'm working, at times when I'm working. And at times when there are times when I'm working and I can't feel it, which can complicate matters as I'm trying to write. So yeah, I don't really have an answer, but it's very present.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on a personal level. As someone in my 60s, I'm really moved by Katie's Ancestor Project because I think bringing different queer generations together and having us know each other, come to support each other and embrace each other, it's one of the things that could not be more vital for our community. Anyway, I would like to open it up for questions.
We're not going to answer the question about building bridges?
So sorry.
Oh, are we running low on time?
Yes, we
Okay.
only have 5 minutes left.
Oh, goodness, my God, we've been rambling.
I gave these, I gave these guys lots of questions, but I came up with more questions than we could answer in
Okay.
the time period.
Gotcha.
But you can feel free to answer that as we, go on. Yes.
bridges.
It was a question about bridging different constituencies and bringing them together, at least in some way, which feels crucial to me in this time. And different constituencies could be generational, could be across race, across gender and or sexuality, or even different literary styles and kinds of writers. If anyone would like to answer.
Go for it. Please.
Well, I was just going to say I don't know that I have an expert answer at this, but I do know, and all of us in this room probably at this point know, right, that like part of the root of social injustice is division, and we have been so many of our marginalized communities of all stripes have been intentionally divided and pitted against each other. This is not new. This is something we know. But I think, I can say it's certainly more important now than ever that we're able to come together. But I really think it's that collaboration, the collaboration of building bridges is so crucial at a moment where so much is at risk, because we have to be able to work collaboratively to pool resources to keep our efforts in the game because of the corporatization of publishing and because of the corporatization of so many things. Like, we have to be doing that. And so, I don't have an answer that's more developed than that, but I think for me as a leader of an organization that has been around for a few years and is still growing, like, I'm doing a lot of the same kind of work that Sam, that you're starting to do. Right? And so it's a matter, and then you start to think about, there's so many different causes and so many different people that need, because that is what our system is set up to create. And it can become overwhelming to sort of try and think through how to survive for yourself and your organization, let alone sort of lifting others as you climb. And so I don't have an answer as to how we solve that at a time when it seems like everyone's resources are dwindling. But I'm thinking about it. I'm sure that everyone on this panel is thinking about it. I'm sure that many of you are thinking about it. And if we can just sort of communicate with each other and collaborate and build relationships, you never know what can come out of that, because we do have to keep each other going. We have to. We cannot all be swallowed by corporations.
I would say also that, as I said earlier, the young people I work with are really showing up for connecting with ancestors, connecting with elders as well, and often are in need of support because more than one has said that they approached queer and trans history, BIPOC history, with great trepidation because they knew there was so much suffering there. There was so much agony there. There was so much to not feel supportive. But when they are supported in researching, in learning, they discover there's also that huge well of creative resistance, And I feel like that's a lot of what we do, is support them in getting there. I would also say that we bridge abilities in the program. I mean, when we began, we advertised it a program for artists and writers, and now we promote the program as a program for folks who are interested in creating, interested in writing, because so many folks have not had access, have not had access to the classes, to the support, to whatever, whether it's in school or out of school, to be able to claim the word writer, to be able to claim the word artist. And so we are getting a much more diverse, and we very deliberately, we don't accept people based on like who has the best work samples, but rather based on who needs the program most. Yeah, that's enough.
Okay. Great. Yes, Betsy.
I had a whole answer about, diversity and inclusion and roles and that kind of thing, but one of the things, my Intel background does make me sort of look at where we are and what's the next step and what's around the next corner. That's just sort of in my DNA. And what I have been thinking a lot about is what happens when the fever breaks. We have spent a lot of years being pitted against one another for the interests of others. In some cases, we've allowed ourselves to be drawn into that divide, and it comes out in policing our spaces, by ourselves. Saying this person belongs or this person doesn't belong. And what are the next steps? How do we repair this once the fever breaks? And my wife and I talk a lot about the importance to build identity in something other than politics. Our politics, salad dressing is political now. Where you buy your hamburger, if you buy a hamburger, whatever, everything has become so politicized that it's become a primary identity. And so how can we create identities that are opportunities for connection and bridge building that are not in that space? How can we begin to speak with one another again without making assumptions about what balsamic vinegar you have on your salad, right? And part of that is literature. There's a real opportunity here. Art, all sorts of things. There are ways that we can connect. Bowling leagues, whatever it is. Find something and make conversation with people. Ask me later, I'll tell you about the American Women's Quarters Program and what we do with that. But I'm concerned about how we move past this. I'm optimistic enough to believe that we will, or else I couldn't go on. So.
Right.
So we are over time, but other folks can jump in if they want. I don't think they're kicking us out of the room quite yet. And if other folks have questions, or feel free to jump in for other panelists. Questions or comments? All right, let's thank our magnificent panel.